The democratic upheaval that influenced 19th century politics didn't stop at the ballot box. The era was marked by reforms that affected many areas of American society. This movement grew out of a new awakening of religious feeling. It was called the Second Great Awakening and motivated Americans to examine religion in their daily lives. Thousands of people were drawn to camp meetings or revivals, where they were inspired by passionate speakers. Perhaps the most famous orator of the time was Charles Grandison Finney. Finney's sermons were so fiery that the area where he preached, in central and western New York State, came to be called the Burned-Over District. The Second Great Awakening was rooted in religion, but it inspired many of the period's great crusades and gave rise to countless benevolent and charitable organizations. Name a social evil, crime, poverty, ignorance, even cleanliness, and Americans sought to combat it with some organized effort. In 1830s Massachusetts, Horace Mann was among the earliest advocates for free public education. He advocated for better schoolhouses, mandatory attendance, professionally trained teachers, and other ideas that were groundbreaking for the time. Mann's innovations were widely adopted during the 19th century, but some students were left behind. Even free African Americans were excluded from most schools, and those who were enslaved were legally forbidden from receiving formal instruction. At about the same time, Boston ministers, including Lyman Beecher, organized to promote the suppression of the intemperate use of intoxicating liquors. The so-called temperance movement gave rise to groups such as the American Temperance Society and the American Temperance Union. These groups used advertising campaigns to warn of the devastating personal and social effects of drinking alcohol. Women played a significant role in the temperance movement, and by 1855, 13 states had passed laws prohibiting alcohol altogether, though many of these were later overruled by the courts. Other reformers called attention to the appalling conditions in prisons, poorhouses, and insane asylums. In the 1840s, Dorothea Dix became a tireless crusader for the moral treatment of the mentally ill. At the East Cambridge, Massachusetts House of Corrections, she witnessed the plight of the mentally ill firsthand.
Insane persons confined in cages, closets, cellars, stalls, pens, chained, naked, beaten with rods, and lashed into obedience.
Dix testified before governmental bodies using explicit descriptions to powerful effect, and shamed political leaders into taking action. During her lifetime, Dorothea Dix helped to establish or expand more than 30 hospitals for those suffering from mental disabilities. These accomplishments were extraordinary, especially in light of the social discrimination that women faced during the early 19th century. But as the decades unfolded, many women were awakened to their unequal place in society and began to fight for change. In 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott organized a women's rights convention at Seneca Falls, New York, the first of its kind anywhere in the world. Just 32 years old at the time, Stanton drafted a Declaration of Sentiments, enunciating injuries and usurpations on the part of man toward woman, and proclaiming that all men and women are created equal. Gender equality was a radical idea for the time. A reporter for the Oneida Whig complained that the comforts and privileges enjoyed by men were threatened.
This bolt is the most shocking and unnatural incident ever recorded in the history of womanity.
In St. Louis, the Daily Reveille trumpeted a more uplifting message.
The flag of independence has been hoisted for the second time on this side of the Atlantic.
Equal rights for women was a distant reality, but Seneca Falls was a catalyst for future change. It inspired Stanton and others to continue their fight for fair pay and better employment opportunities, property rights, equal education, and, above all, women's suffrage, a movement that, once ignited, would be impossible to extinguish. And it galvanized many women's rights advocates to take up the banner for other reform issues of the day, chief among them, the abolition of slavery.